Mr. Collard, I'll start with you, but anybody that wants to answer this question, feel free. Each member will have 5 minutes and we also have a round of votes. That's why evening hearings on return nights are so good. We don't get interrupted with votes. But my staff recently obtained an email and the supervisory chain, how many levels there are between the scheduler and the secretary. And of course the scheduling clerk's called medical support assistant. Shows 12 layers of bureaucrats and middle managers between those two people. Is that surprising?
It's not surprising, but it's clearly an indicator of the issue. On the private sector, you wouldn't think about care that could be rendered in a safe, timely fashion with 12 layers of leadership between someone in the trenches and someone making a decision. It also creates the greater opportunity for the variance in communication, the variance in setting expectations. The layers just create the permutations for communication within the VA.
Anybody else want to comment?
And how about the time it takes, all that communication? This is time. And you know, one of the studies that just recently came out showed that when an older vet is forced to wait 90 days or more for treatment, it increases the risk of stroke by 9%. That's a study right out of the Boston VA Medical Center. So this time is critical to saving the lives of these vets. That's why they're dying in these wait lines.
Tell me, if you would, how does this structure compare to your experience in observing other medical centers or systems? Mr. McLean?
I don't have a lot of experience in observing other medical centers. Humana, for the most part, is a health and wellness Medicare Advantage company. We do a lot of business with VA, and we have seen the difficulty that we have as a contractor in also getting certain answers and certain things changed or done for the betterment of the veteran.
Mr. Collard?
We would find traditionally no more than 3 or 4 layers. I was with an organization yesterday, and it was the traditional structure of a senior leadership team, directors, managers, and right to the front line.
And I think you also, I think, Mr. Collard, you may have, but others of you may have also alluded to this as well. The number of healthcare networks that exist across this country, 21. I mean, you've got a large network, system. How many networks should there be? I mean, surely it should be broken up somehow, but 21?
Even if the number stayed 21, the ability to standardize across the 21 is really the key. There are, healthcare is always local, no matter whether it's private sector or government. Healthcare is always local because we're serving local veterans. But the ability to say whether it needs to be 21 or 6, really the underpinnings of that, when you lift up the hood on that, is the ability to standardize across no matter how many regions or VISNs or divisions that you have.
Dr. McCoy.
Yes. One of the problems is really quite simple, and it's been pointed out in many of the reports that have been submitted to Congress over the last decade, including the one that was presented on Monday and the one that was presented by the General Accountability Office in March of 2013. And that is that vets are assigned an appointment, and then months go by and nobody calls them to remind them a day or 2 before the appointment that they're supposed to come. That is a practice that is always done in private sector medicine. Every doctor's office, every clinic, every hospital calls patients and reminds them to show up for their appointment. The result of this failure is that in some departments like ophthalmology, according to the GAO report submitted to you last March, the no-show rate is 45%. So when you say you don't have enough appointments and enough doctors, almost half of them are going to waste. And yet why, every year, does another report have to remind the VA to call the patients and nothing is done about it?
My time's about to expire, but I'd like, if you could, as succinctly as possible, what's the greatest single barrier that exists out there today within the VA to providing timely health care?
And I'm going to go off on what Mr. Collard said is standardization. You've all heard it. If you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. And there is too much, I guess, flexibility or variability in how services are delivered and how veterans can access services at each of the VA facilities.
When you standardize your practice, you create greater predictability in outcomes. Whether it's an attorney, a finance expert, a healthcare expert, they'd all agree that when you standardize your mode of practice, you create greater predictability in outcomes. And it's the outcomes that I think ultimately this panel has to be able to address, and not just the process of care measures that we're talking about.
Thank you. Dr. McCoy?
Yes, I'd like you to focus on the failings of this bill, because pretty soon you're going to be voting on it or compromising with the vote you took in the House to create a final bill. And that final bill that you create has to remove these practical impediments. Otherwise, you are not passing a bill to give vets access to civilian care. It will be a charade if they have to get a letter from the secretary and if there has to be a call made to get prior approval for the treatment. Just remember that, please, as you compromise with the Senate. Thank you.